Hello and welcome to another talk, preach, sermon in the series of Awktober, where we talk about things that are awkward to talk about in church. When I actually asked this question in our church, what would be the most awkward thing to talk about in church, everybody said money, finances, cash, moolah, whatever you like to call it. You know what? I've actually been at our church now for 7 years. Actually, nearly 8. And in all that time I've been there, I have never ever preached on finances. Ever. I don't know where people go when they say that all people ever talk about in church is money. I know you can't leave money lying around anywhere in the church, but I've never talked about it before, I don't think. We've also just had Thanksgiving. It's a funny thing, it's a funny word, Thanksgiving, because it ends in the word giving. Being thankful is only part of Thanksgiving. There's no point in me walking around being thankful that somebody has come into the church and put out fantastic autumn decorations. The decorators won't know that I am thankful for that unless I actually give my thanks to them. So the very act of giving my thanks actually finishes the phrase Thanksgiving. And I feel that our giving sometimes completes our act of thankfulness for things. Just put that little thought away in the back of your brain for a moment. It's an awkward thing, an Awktober, to talk about finances and giving. People get squirrely about it for some unknown reason. I have to deliberately and intentionally remember to give thanks for things, and even in saying that, I use the word to give thanks for things. Like I said, it completes the circle of thanksgiving when I actually go and do that. Now, before anybody leaps to this conclusion, it's great to be able to talk about giving in a church that isn't financially in need or in financial trouble. It's great to be able to do that. I'm not standing up in front of a congregation on Sunday and saying, hey, you need to give because we can't pay wages, we can't finance the building, we can't pay it, we don't have a mortgage on the building, we've paid it off, but we can't meet the utility bills, which are really, really tiny actually, because we're careful with things like that. But it's one of those things that it's a great position to be in, to be able to talk about finances when we are not in financial need. Which brings me to another point. We don't talk about finances in church when we do talk about it because God needs your money. Our church at the moment actually doesn't depend on a more generous outpouring in offerings, and actually God doesn't depend on me giving any money either. He owns everything. What possible difference does it make to God if I give or not? Well, it doesn't make any difference to God. The wonderful thing about me giving and having a heart of generosity is that it changes me. I met a generous God. And so when I meet a generous God, when a generous God forgives me, when a generous God deals with all my sin, when a generous God deals with my character issues, he doesn't just do enough just so I can squeak by. He is overly generous. And when I meet a generous God, I should then become a generous human being. I'm not talking about giving and finances because in the New Testament there's actually no direct command to give tithes even. but you're still legalistic about giving. In fact, it goes further than that. When Paul writes his letter to the church in Corinth, 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 8, it says this. It says, when he talks about giving, he says, I'm actually not commanding you to give. Why does he say that? He says it because it's not a legalistic thing. It's a heart issue. Our generosity towards God and towards people is a heart issue, not a legislated, legalistic issue. We shouldn't be demanding stuff of people. We should have our hearts moved and our hearts melted so that we can do what God asks us to do. There's 2 chapters in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, that I just mentioned. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 2 Corinthians chapter 9. The whole of those 2 chapters talk about giving and instructions about giving and how our heart's response should be towards giving. And it's interesting, 3 verses earlier than 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 8, which I just quoted, is 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 5. And this is what that says. Let me read that to you. The churches there did even more than we had hoped, for their first action was to give themselves to the Lord. What a great place to start talking about giving. Their first actions. The churches that Paul was writing to the Corinthians about, he said their first actions was to give themselves to God. What a great thought, that we would give our faith, that we'd put our faith in, that we would give our cares, we would put our cares into, that we would put our trust, we would give our cares and trust to God, that we would give I would give my shortcomings, I would give my character flaws, I would give my anxieties to God. If we haven't done that first, maybe today, maybe as you're listening to that, you might be thinking to yourself, I've never actually given myself to God. Well, that's a great place to start right now. Giving ourselves to God. This incredible thought. And they started by doing that. This church that Paul talked about started by giving themselves back to God. Now, Paul doesn't just leave it there when he's writing to the Corinthians. He starts to tell a story. It's a very short story. It's only a couple of verses long. It's an illustration story. I would say it's an illustrative story if I was feeling posh, but I'm not. It's a bit chilly out here in the woods, but it's also beautiful. It's wonderful. This is what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 9. In verse 6 and 7. Remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop. A farmer who plants only a small amount of seeds will only get a small crop. I spent some time in the prairies. Not a lot of time in the prairies, a fair amount. Like 18 months, 2 years in the prairies. Hang around with a lot of farmers. Got incredible equipment. Massive, giant Tonka toys that you get to drive in and stuff. Absolutely wonderful fun. And none of them accidentally went out and sowed a crop. None of them accidentally fell out of bed one morning without planning it and then walked back in to the house a few hours later and said, I don't know what just happened. I went out and before I knew it, I ploughed a field and sowed a crop. Sowed a bunch of seed. I didn't even intend to do it. It just happened. There's a lot of planning and intentionality that comes about a farmer ploughing and planting seed in the ground to grow produce. A farmer that goes out to plant seed does it intentionally. Now, before I forget to say this, because I will if I don't do it now, I miss the intentionality of giving. Since COVID, we stopped taking a collection in the church. Just because of COVID reasons, for no other reason. And we've never gone back to taking a collection in the church. We have a little offering box at the back. It's in the shape of a church, and you can put your offering in there. But I set up automatic giving from my bank account. And you know what I miss? I miss the bag coming around and me taking money out of my pocket or writing a check. I know most people don't write checks anymore. I love writing checks. It just feels like I'm writing my own money to me still. Writing money, and I take the checkbook out and I intentionally write down the name of the church, the amount, sign it with my name, the date, and in the memo at the bottom I put offering. And I miss the intentionality of that. So we've talked it over as elders in our church, and we actually talked about it in the congregational meeting, and we are actually going back to having an offering bag so that we can revisit the intentionality of giving. Now listen to what it says. A farmer who plants only a small amount of seed will get a small crop, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must decide in your heart. You see, I'm not lying. It's a heart issue. How much you are going to give. And don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure. For God loves a person who gives cheerfully or readily or enthusiastically. Why? Because it's a heart issue. Now, when I was in the prairies, two particular farming families that I spent time with were the Weenses and the Swans. Now, between them, there was others, but the Weenses and the Swans. Loads of others, the Hermansons, and lots of. I'm gonna get in trouble if I don't list them all off. You know, yeah, I can't go there. So the Weenses and the Swans, between them, took out loans, and they won't be offended by me saying this. Took out loans of millions of dollars, millions every year, millions of dollars, to buy seed. And it was delivered. It's a lot of seed, millions of dollars. You don't carry it home in a bag. It's delivered in trucks and dumped in barns, ready to put into air seeders and put in the floor. And it's wonderful. And those millions of dollars of seeds, if they'd wanted to, they could have milled those seeds and turned them into flour and stuff like that, and they could have sold the millions of dollars of seeds. And if they'd done that, those seeds would be all they ever had. But if they took those millions of dollars and in faith and in trust put those millions of dollars worth of seed into the ground and trusted that God would bring the increase. I actually don't have enough faith to be a farmer. I really don't. Like taking out millions of dollars in loans and then putting that money into the ground if nothing grows, all the money's gone. But trusting that God will give the increase. So if they just kept the seed they bought, that's all they'd have. But if they plant it and trust God to grow it, who knows what God can do with it? And I sat in a combine harvester with these guys and watched the seed filling up the hopper at the back. It's incredible. When we've harvested sunflowers and the sunflowers that are planted from the sunflower seeds, and then they grow and they pound away in the head as it cuts them down, the combine harvester goes through it and it cuts them off, and the heads bang around. It's so noisy, but then the hopper at the back is full of seed, tons and tons of seed, because God brings the increase. Now, I'm not going to go down the line of if you give to God, He'll give you more back, so you need to give to, because that's like televangelists do, like phone this number, make a donation. If you donate to this ministry, God will expand your finances. No. That's giving to get. And I don't want to go down that path. I don't give so that I can get more. I give because my heart has been touched by the living God, and I want to give because I've met a generous God. So, when I give, who knows what God can do with my giving? When I give, who knows what will grow out of my giving? Who knows what God can possibly do with what I give when my heart is right? Last week when we talked about politics, if I'd had the time to geek out over the verbiage of the original language, it says this: submit yourself to the governing authorities, or the authorities that have government over you. That word governing, the meanings for it, when you pass it all open and you study the word, authorities that govern you, that make you better than, that make you exceed. My giving makes me better than I would have been had I not given. Not necessarily talking financially better off. Talking about better heart condition. Makes me more generous in every area of my life. My heart changes when I become a generous person and give generous, to be better than. And I was thinking about this, paying my bills. How can I be a better bill payer? Well, where I live, I pay diking fees, and I have to go along and pay diking. And thankful that my house is not flooded. I think I mentioned that the other week. But how about if I went to pay my diking fees, and instead of just paying them, for a moment I just stopped there with a lady behind the screen and said, "Hey, thank you. Thank you for collecting these diking fees to build the dikes. Thank you for collecting my property tax so that I can live in peace and on paved roads and have sewage dealt with and have street lights on and have traffic lights and systems that actually work, so that I can have officials that I don't have to bribe. Thank you for collecting my property taxes." What happens if I was to put in my income tax return every year and ask my accountant? Can you imagine if we asked our accountants to send in a little note to Canada Revenue Agency or the Inland Revenue Agency or the IRS, wherever you send your taxes, and just tell our accountants to put down a little note saying, "Thank you for the work you do"? Can you imagine what would happen in our village office if every person from our church went to the village office to pay their property tax, and as they did it, they went, "Thank you for what you're doing"? I wonder how long it would be before they start to ask, who are all these people? Where are they coming from? I want to join a group of people like that. You know what? There's a town, small town, and there's a young man that lives there. He has some severe learning difficulties, this young man. He's in his early 30s, and his mum died. He used to live with his mum. His mum died, and he was very sad. His mum cared for him, looked after him, did everything for him. And one day he went down to a local cafe and just sat in the cafe. And because of his learning difficulties, he just went to the fridge and took out a soft drink and poured himself some coffee. And the owner of the cafe went across and he gave him a breakfast. That young man ate the breakfast, drank the drinks, and got up and left. Didn't think, wasn't trying to rip anybody off, but doesn't have the cognitive wellness to know that he has to pay. The next day he came in, and the cafe owner did exactly the same thing. Well, the local church decided that they would partner with the cafe owner and pay for every single breakfast that young man came in to eat. And that local church has been paying for that young man's breakfasts ever since, along with the owner of the cafe. I don't know about you, but I want to belong to a church like that. I want to belong to a church that doesn't come after people for money so that it can hoard money. I want to belong to a church that has got people in it who want to be generous because they've met a generous God, and who will buy breakfast for a mentally disabled young man who doesn't know that he has to pay for food. I want to be part of a church like that. I want to be part of a church that when you visit their website, it's either hard or impossible to find out where to donate. Because their first action isn't to try to get money from people, but rather to serve people. I don't know about you, but I want God to change my heart to make me more generous. I don't want my giving to be legalistic or demanded. I want it to be motivated by the fact that I've met a generous God who gives me more than I need. I want to be part of a church that thanks the village office for collecting property taxes. What a wonderful thought, that we be cheerful, thankful givers. Thank you for listening today. Maybe take this away and just think about it. It's not a legalistic thing to give. It's a heart issue. And God blesses those who give with a cheerful heart. Bless you today. Thank you for listening. And remember, thanksgiving is a doing word. Bless you. Stay safe.